And breaking news right now is a winner has been selected in Tennessee's 7th congressional district. Republican nominee Matt Van Epps has won and will take over the seat that former Representative Mike Green resigned from back in July. Let's bring in NBC News chief data analyst Steve Kornacki, who's been at the big board all night. So, Steve, break down how Van Epps pulled out this victory here.
Yeah, Gotti, really interesting. I think one of the things we've seen, as you can see, about 3/4 of the vote is in right now. Matt Van Epps, the Republican, leading by 8 points, about a 10,000 vote margin over Afton Bain. You know, what's interesting about this district is there's a big Democratic area right here. It's the city of Nashville, or it's part of the city of Nashville. And you know what? Afton Bain, the Democrat, did really well here. We're still waiting. There's more votes to come in from there. But this is a massive margin for Bain here. She won. She's leading by 65 points in Davidson County. She got a very high turnout in Davidson County. So that was a very encouraging sign for her. But what has happened as this map has filled in tonight is we have seen in rural Republican areas, in more swingy areas, and critically, I think, in the suburbs, the well-to-do suburbs of Williamson County, immediately south of Nashville, I think Van Epps exceeded expectations, and I think he did it with a flood of late interest in this race. One of the things, Gotti, that we've been tracking as these results came in tonight was the difference between the vote that was cast early. This was cast weeks ago, days ago, the early vote, versus the election day vote. The folks who woke up today, decided to go out and vote, and did so in person at the polls. There is a massive difference between how these candidates did, depending on which vote we're talking about. Bain won the early vote. Van Epps has an absolute landslide in the same day vote. Republicans, Gotti, talked about this race drawing national attention in the last week. They talked about Bain having taken some far left positions, having some inflammatory rhetoric in the past. They said they had shined a light on that. They had woken up Republican voters in this district. Maybe they had woken up swing voters in this district who may not be nuts about Trump and the Republicans right now. And they had turned those voters against Bain and motivated them to vote. Looking at the turnout that we're seeing same day, I think there's some evidence in these results that that is what happened. So again, overall, Republican district, typically Trump won it by 22 points. Republicans were, I think, kind of panicking a bit last week when polling showed this to be close to a dead even race. But Van Epps ahead by 8 points. I think there'll be some more Democratic vote to come here out of Davidson County, Nashville, but there's going to be an awful lot more Republican vote. So you may be looking at a margin that finishes somewhere right around what you're looking at. Republicans, I think, Gotti, would love to see that number go high and be able to say double digits. We'll see where it ends up landing.
Yeah, so that late interest in this kind of coincides with, you know, at least some of what we saw from Speaker Mike Johnson, from the president calling into one of Van Epps's campaign rallies. How do these numbers so far, and I know it's only 75% reporting here, but how do they stack up with the numbers that we saw during the presidential election?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, again, the backdrop here. I'll just show you. This was the result in this district in 2024. Donald Trump won the district by 22 points. I could wind the clock back farther. It was 16 points. I've been saying 15, but he won it by 16 points in 2020. So you're talking about traditionally, staunchly Republican areas. Again, I think one of the questions coming into tonight was, you know, Democrats want this thing to be, they obviously want to win it, but they want this thing to be a squeaker. They want this thing certainly to be in single digits to say they've got momentum. And I think they can certainly, you know, if this thing were to still land in single digits, they'll make that argument. And there's a lot to be said for that. We're certainly seeing a very motivated Democratic base there. But one thing Republicans have been saying, too, is they think next year, even if there's a difficult political environment for them in the midterms, you know, they think the Democratic Party has a bit of an image problem. You know, some of the folks who sort of have become national faces of the Democratic Party, folks like AOC, Bernie Sanders, Zoran Mamdani in New York City, you know, Republicans think they can turn some swing voters against Democrats, you know, tying them to those kinds of candidates, those kinds of positions, and motivating Republican voters to vote against Democrats. There's some evidence, I think, just based, again, on this same day vote, that Republicans got a lot more interest in the final days of this campaign. I think that's what they're going to talk up coming out of this. But yeah, overall, if this lands at 8 points, Democrats are going to be able to say they made a pretty big stride in a very Republican area.
Steve Kornacki at the big board. Steve, always a pleasure to watch you break down those numbers. Thanks so much.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.